Dagens YouTube. Idag är dags för en ny video. Som är en reaktionvideo. Och den här reaktionvideon heter 13 True Story. Heter den så.
Är ni redo för en video? Nu kommer den. Här börjar videon.
Och nu är filten på. Så nu jävla kör vi.
I've learned one thing from my one and only experience picking up a hitchhiker. Don't pick up a hitchhiker. It was a Saturday night, probably around 1 in the morning. I was driving down the 542 in New Jersey, a route I commonly took to get into town. It was a long stretch of nothing but woods on either side with the occasional residence. I was on my way back home from town, and as usual at this time of night around our quiet old town, there was not a single other car on the road. I turned on the off-road lights on my Jeep to have optimal vision on the unlit highway, which allowed me to spot somebody far down the road, just standing at the side. As I got closer, I saw him raise his arm up and stick up his thumb. He was trying to hitch a ride. My heart started racing. I had no idea if I should stop or not. I slowed down just to get a better look at the guy, first of all. He seemed like a younger man, maybe 28. He had on a light gray hoodie with the hood over his head and blue denim jeans. The time to make a decision was immediate, and with a lack of my better judgment in the heat of the moment, I came to a stop, rolled down the window, and asked, "Where are you heading to, friend?" "Just up the road," he said in a deep, quiet tone. "Hop in," I called out the window. He opened the door to my Jeep and stepped inside slowly. Jeep Wranglers have very tight seals on the doors, so when he tried to close the door the first time, it didn't shut. I politely said, "Oh, the door didn't shut. Just open and slam it shut real hard. These doors are hard to close." The body language he was giving off in response was unsettling. About 3 seconds after I had finished my sentence, he looked at me, then turned his head slowly to the right, and again waited 3 or 4 more seconds before finally opening the door and then slamming it back shut. By the way this guy was moving, I already regretted my decision to let him in. I put my foot on the gas and we started moving along the road. The speed limit on this road was 55, but I was going 75 just to get the guy to his destination quicker. "So, how far did you say you're going?" There was an awkward gap of silence before he replied with, "Just a few miles up." I wanted to turn the radio on to kill this awkward and downright creepy silence, but something in my head told me not to for whatever reason. Suddenly, I could see just through the corner of my eye that the man had turned his head and was staring in my direction. At this point, I was telling myself that I needed to get this guy out of my car. For a good mile, I felt his gaze just hitting me like a brick, and all the while I tried my best not to look back. Finally, he turned his head the other way and said, "You know, I've been wondering for the longest time if it's just worth it to end it all." I looked at him in confusion. He dug his hand into his pocket and said, "I've been carrying this knife with me for the past few weeks, wondering when the right time would come." He pulled out a big red knife from his pocket, and at that instant I felt like my stomach had dropped out of my body. I told him to put the knife away immediately. He told me in a calm, emotionless voice, "Pull over next to that sign." I did what he said, coming to a stop next to a speed limit sign, and what followed still haunts me. He began to slit his forearm next to 3 other scars from previous assumed self-inflicted cuts, and let out a disturbing moan. I managed to choke out the words, "You need to get out of my car right now, buddy." He looked at me again and said, "Get out of the car. I want to show you something." I told him no, and he raised his knife up closer to me as an obvious threat. "Just get out for a second. There's something I want to show you behind that sign." I knew my life was on the line and I had to be smart. I said, "Yeah, okay, man." Let's go. I opened the door to my Jeep, making a point of leaving it open, raised my hands in the air and backed away slowly from the door. He too left the car and started walking over to my side. At the exact moment that he was directly behind the car, I jumped back in, threw it into drive, and floored it down the road,
Perfect.
never looking back. I got back home within 10 minutes, still breathing heavily and wanting to throw up. This was the scariest thing that has ever happened to me, and I urge everybody and anybody that if you by some chance see a hitchhiker on a dead road at some odd hours of the night, do not take any course of action other than speeding right past them.
I'm sharing this life experience of mine with the internet as a public service announcement to be careful on Craigslist or any similar websites.
Jaså?
I happen to be browsing the for sale section of Craigslist trying to find a used laptop. One listing really got my attention, some Dell touchscreen laptop for $250. It looked like it was in good shape with very few minor cosmetic imperfections. I texted the owner, who introduced himself as Dave, and told me I could come pick it up that same night. He offered to meet halfway somewhere so that I wouldn't have to drive all the way out to his place. I live in the countryside, so he lived a solid 10 miles away, which would equate to a 20 to 25 minute drive. Since there aren't many notable places near either of us, we agreed to meet at a 7-Eleven parking lot. I got there at the agreed upon time, which was 10 p.m. sharp. I waited around for a few minutes, then I decided I was going to give him a call. But just as I took my phone out of my pocket to call him, his name came up on my phone. He was calling me. I picked up, skipping the hello, and just said, "Dave, what's going on?" There was a loud background noise on his end, maybe from his driving. There was an initial moment of silence before he started talking. He said he wouldn't be able to make it all the way to 7-Eleven because his car was making weird noises and he didn't want to go too far from home. So he pulled over to the side of the road off some side street. But when we say side streets out here, we don't mean side streets surrounded by buildings or houses. Side streets out here usually mean roads with no streetlights and surrounded by forest or farms. He gave some bizarre description of where he was. There was no way I'd be able to find it ordinarily, so I had him send me his location through his phone. He really was just parked on the side of some side road somewhere. I really didn't know if I was comfortable going at this point. It seemed way too suspicious. I'd heard all about those Craigslist horror stories before, and this seemed like the cliche build-up to one. Against my better judgment, I started driving over to Dave's location anyway. About 5 minutes of driving later on some completely pitch-black road, I eventually saw the reflection of someone's taillights parked on the side of the road. So it had to be him. I pulled up behind the car in the grass next to a large cornfield but kept the car running. I turned my headlights off for a second, and it literally became blackness in every possible direction. So I turned the headlights back on. Weird though, I didn't see any light from his car. Not even the light from a phone. I called him again. He picked up on the first ring and said he had to run into the crops to take a quick piss, and to just get into his car so that when he gets back he could quickly show me his laptop. He hung up before I could even get my response in. This was too weird for me. I really didn't know what to do. I guess I figured I'd step out of the car and just wait behind the door for this Dave person to come out. He said he went into the crops, so I kept my eyes on the right side of the road by the crops. What a strange place to have any kind of exchange other than a drug deal. It didn't seem right at all. I stood right by my car door for the longest time, easily 2 or 3 minutes. There was no way he was peeing for that long. It was starting to seem like it was time to go. I'd give him another 30 seconds, I figured. In the final moments of my waning patience standing there, I thought I heard brushing around coming from the crops. I kept doing double takes from one side of the crops to the other. "Dave?" I yelled. The brushing sounds in the crops faded away, but a crackling leaf or two from behind my car made me turn to see someone sneaking up on me from behind my car.
Oh no.
Exactly what I feared would happen, but that didn't make it any less horrific as I jumped into my car and floored it before the door was even fully shut. I literally loved myself for thinking to leave the car running. If I had turned it off, I may not have escaped in time. Deep down, I kinda knew the situation was far too suspicious to be real. But really, do any of us ever expect things like this to happen? These things are only supposed to happen in horror movies. You're not actually supposed to experience them for yourself. I guess it just remains a story to tell friends and family for years to come.
Thanks for watching.
When I was about 11, some friends and I were having a slumber party, and we all snuck out of the house in the middle of the night and went to a park about a half a block away. We had been there at least an hour or so when I thought I saw a large figure about 100 feet away, lurking in the shadows under some trees. We all turned to look and stare at the shadow's direction for about 5 minutes, trying to make it out. Right about when we decided we were seeing things, the figure started running at top speed towards us. We jumped up and ran back to the house as fast as we could go and locked the door. We could hear someone moving around the outside of the house, and then someone began tapping on the windows. We couldn't wake anyone up, since we would have to admit that we had snuck out. We spent the night huddled together in the middle of the living room. None of us slept that night.
At the time of this story, I had already met a total of 3 people on Match.com. It didn't really work out with 2 of them, and the third one I dated for 4 months. After my breakup, I wanted to take a break from commitment and just find something more casual. And so I matched with a girl named Kylie, who I got along with decently well on the app. She seemed down to just come over to my apartment and hang out for the night. She showed up about half an hour later and seemed really quiet in person. We hung out in my room in the upstairs of my apartment for most of the night. We just talked for a while watching TV in the background. There were a bunch of awkward silences, but I did my best to fill them with new conversations. In the back of my mind the whole time I was thinking, are we gonna kiss? Does she expect me to move in for the kiss? How do I go about it? But hours of talking later, I started to realize there was something wrong with this girl. She became increasingly more emotionless. She was staring off across the room as she'd talk slowly, talking about increasingly deep and dark things. Then she said something surprising. She thanked me for allowing her to sleep over. Apparently when I said she could come hang out for the night, she meant to literally stay the night. She got off the bed and asked what blanket she could use for the floor. I grabbed a couple blankets and pillows and made a sort of bed for her on the floor. She thanked me and then laid down on her side facing away from me. I guessed she was ready to go to sleep. I turned off the TV and closed my eyes. We didn't say a single word to each other, and I have to admit it was very awkward. I fell asleep probably half an hour after shutting the TV, but I awoke randomly in the middle of the night. I sat up and looked down at the floor, and was able to see that Kylie didn't appear to be laying on the floor anymore. I flipped on the lamp and looked around the room. She wasn't anywhere, actually. But just then, I heard a voice downstairs. It sounded like it could be Kylie. All the walls in my apartment are paper thin, so noise travels quite easily throughout it. I quietly left my room and stood at the foot of the top of the stairs, listening for what Kylie could be saying. All the lights upstairs were off, but she was talking in a low voice. I just couldn't tell for sure what exactly she was saying. I figured she was on the phone with someone, but still, I went downstairs to check. I stepped into the dark kitchen, and there she was. But she wasn't on the phone. She was just creepily sitting in one of the chairs facing the wall. She seemed to still be muttering to herself. I was frozen. All I could say was, "Kylie?" She turned her head to me slowly, looked at me for a few seconds, then turned back to face the wall. I went upstairs quickly to my room and crawled into my bed to call my dad. I had to call at least 3 times before he finally picked up, obviously sounding concerned. I told him in a quiet panic that some random girl from online was staying the night, and now she was sitting in my kitchen muttering to herself like a crazy person. He sounded confused as hell, but told me to call 911 if she seemed like she was having some kind of episode to safely get her out of there. Then I looked up and noticed a figure standing by my bedroom door in the dark. It was Kylie. All I saw was the outline of her skinny body. She stood there for maybe 10 seconds. All I heard was my dad on the other end of the phone saying hello over and over. The next thing I saw was the silhouette of Kylie at my door suddenly charge at me in my bed as she began to scream. She lunged at me and put her hands around my throat, trying to choke me. However, I was able to quickly overpower her and hold her down against the bed. I screamed at my dad to call the cops. I was able to drag the insane girl downstairs by the time the cops came. The cops took her away to fill out a few documents. I think it's safe to say that you should always meet people from websites and apps in a safe, public place first.
In all my years of being a police officer in Floyd County, Georgia, I had only experienced 2 horrifying situations. I'll share with you the worst of the 2. It was a slow night, and I was patrolling the dirt roads in my cruiser. At this particular spot, there were tiny woods on both sides of the road. And then it all started. I spotted somebody jumping into the woods on the left. I only saw half of them though. They were gone so quickly. I pulled up closer and shined the spotlight into the woods. I didn't see them. Unfortunately, it was kind of my job to check on things like this, so I hesitantly stepped out from the car and began searching. In a moment like this, I was so ready to pull my gun, as I was actually terrified. And then, the cliched snap of a branch from behind a tree almost made me want to run back to the car, but I instead did my job and called for them to come out. Someone wearing a mask stepped out from the tree. I told them to raise their arms, take off their mask, and come to me slowly. They raised their hands, but they didn't remove the mask. I tried to demonstrate my authority by yelling this time, ordering them to take it off. They looked as if they were about to take it off, when suddenly, he or she looked to their left, and then back at me. I heard footsteps coming from my right. I drew my gun. I yelled as loud as I could for everybody to come out with their hands up. You may be thinking, why? Well, if you were in this position, in this setting, you would have been shitting yourself just like I was. Another person wearing a mask walked over. This one holding an axe. I had my gun locked on him. But suddenly, footsteps started coming from all directions. I looked around, and I was surrounded. There were at least 10 strangers wearing masks, surrounding me almost in a circle, with only an opening behind me. Half of them were armed with axes and the like. I stood there, gun raised, but not even aimed at anything at this point. I felt like I was going to throw up. One of them, I'm not sure which, finally broke the silence, telling me in a muffled, deep voice, "Go away." My heart dropped as he said this, in a way that I knew I was going to live. I turned and ran for the car, driving down the road half a mile, all while calling for backup. As you would guess, the whole group was gone from the woods when a search squad arrived. I have a theory on this, however. I believe that what I witnessed was some kind of fucked up secret society that was planning on trapping an innocent passerby, and I think that whoever jumped into the woods as I was passing recognized my car as a police car and tried to hide. Had I not been a police officer, I believe they would have stopped me, led me to the woods, and done whatever this group does for its sick kicks.
It's 5 a.m.
How?
I'm about to pass out, and my eyes are gradually getting heavier. But the sight of my girlfriend's face on Skype keeps me fighting to stay awake. We have been Skyping every night for the past 3 months. Long distance is a bitch, but I love her, and I can't wait to hold her in my arms again. My eyes collapse for a mere moment. "Babe, you're tired. Get some sleep." I spring up. "No, it's all good. I'm going to go make some coffee. I'll be right back." I left my screen illuminating in the dark room. I make my way down the stairs into my kitchen, where the kettle naturally belongs. I make my coffee and head back to the computer. I was greeted by the warm smile that I grew fond of. "Welcome back, you macho man."
Thank you.
My pet name. "Hey, sexy," I replied. We always have this moment where we stare blankly at each other, like any normal couple would do. It was another sleepless, perfect night. That is, until my phone went off. As I make my way to reach my phone, I thought to myself, I wonder who it could be calling me at this hour.
Begged.
Could it be just my friend calling, wanting to chat? Do they need a place to crash? Or could it just be a wrong number? I looked at my phone. I froze. It was my girlfriend.
Huh?
I quickly shifted my eyes back to the computer monitor to see if she was playing a trick on me. But she just sat there, hands folded on her desk with that familiar grin. Maybe she butt dialed me or something, I thought. I answered. I heard an eerily, all too familiar voice on the other side. "Hey babe, I'm sorry. I know it's really late. I just got home from Morgan's party. Are
What
you
the-
awake?" My body became solid with fear. My eyes shifted upward to my horror to see my girlfriend staring back at me. "Who are you?" I yelped in terror. "What do you mean, sweetie?" Her eyes became black as her voice became deeper. "It's me." I placed my phone to my ear again. I tried to yell out to her, "Don't go in your room." But the fear held my tongue with a tight grip. "Babe, don't," I whimpered. "What did you say, babe? Sorry, I'm unlocking my door and I couldn't hear you." I sit in horror as the creature that took the form of my girlfriend sheds this bone-chilling, menacing grin and turns its head to one side. I hear her open the door. Both calls end abruptly.
First, a little background information. I worked the night shift at a local gas station when I was 19.
Asha.
I was the only employee in the store, as usual. On Christmas Eve, I had to work the overnight, 10 p.m. into 6 a.m. into Christmas Day. It was a normal night, no customers, and my cleaning was almost finished. I had just got done eating and decided to go out for a smoke when I hear someone walking towards the store in the distance. Now, this was nothing out of the ordinary until the person gets to the pumps and I can actually see them. It was a male, about 5'9" and somewhat thin. He was wearing a dark hoodie, jeans, and was carrying a gift bag. As he got closer, though, I noticed that he was bleeding from his forehead. As he approached me, I asked if he was okay and if he needed any help. I noticed that the bag was empty, which should have been my first red flag. The guy looked me in the eyes, looking dead inside, and said, "You want to help?
No.
Then don't call the fucking cops." I agreed and told him that there was a first aid kit inside and that I'd be happy to help him with his wound. Crazy, I know, but I was just trying to be nice to him since he was someone who could be a threat to me. We went inside the store and I got the first aid kit. As I pulled out the stuff for him to clean himself up with, he said he needed to use the restroom and once again told me not to call the cops. I told myself that if he wasn't out of the bathroom within a reasonable amount of time, I was going to call the police. He didn't come out, so I went outside and called. The dispatcher told me to stay out of the store and find somewhere safe to be until the officers arrived. I stood at the side of the store where he wouldn't be able to see me, but I could see if he came out of the bathroom. He never came out. The police arrived and asked where he was. I pointed and they went in. Just as they got to the door, he opened it and tried to lunge at one of the officers. They tackled him, threw a knife that he was holding, and promptly arrested him. As they were walking him out of the store, he told me that I was lucky that the police got there when they did, and that he'd see me again soon. I was a little shook by that. One of the officers came to take my statement after the other took the guy away. I told the officer what had all happened, and then I asked something I really wish I didn't know the answer to. What was he doing in the bathroom? The officer told me that it was a good thing that I called when I did, because the guy had shot up some heroin in the bathroom, then was going to come out with a knife, stab me, and run with what money was in the register. That's what the bag was for. This guy had a lot of problems and a lot of anger inside of him. The reason he was so angry was also the reason his head was bleeding. He owed his dealer money and got beat because of it. His solution to the problem was robbing the store. The officer told me if I didn't call when I did, I'd either be critically wounded or dead because he wasn't going to allow me to stand between him and that money. I hope I never see that crazy drug addict who wanted to kill me to free himself of debt again.
Ugh.
This happened to a friend of mine. She told me about it about a year or so ago. We'll call her Minji. Minji is in her late 20s and works as an English tutor in South Korea. One evening, a few years ago, she was tutoring a high school boy. They were up studying pretty late and the buses stopped running. Being a long way from his house, the boy asked if he could crash on her floor overnight and get the first bus in the morning. Minji was very reluctant because inviting a teenage male student to stay the night didn't sound like a great idea, but he was begging her and eventually she relented. They went back into her one-room apartment, and she got into the bed while he laid a blanket out on the floor, and they both fell asleep. A few hours later, at maybe 2 a.m., the boy wakes Minji up. "I'm really hungry," he says. "Let's go get some food." Minji opens her eyes and looks up at him in disbelief. "Food? Now? It's 2 a.m. Go back to bed." But the student insists. "No, I'm so hungry. Let's eat something now." She tells him that there's some ramen in the kitchen and he could fix himself some. This doesn't satisfy him. He doesn't want ramen. "There's a 24-hour place just down the road. Let's go there." Eventually, after several minutes of persuasion, the boy gets Minji to come with him to the restaurant. They leave the apartment and head out. As soon as they're on the street, the boy turns to Minji and says, "I'm not hungry. I woke up in the middle of the night and looked under your bed. There's a man sleeping there." They call the police and discover that a homeless man had been living in Minji's apartment, sleeping under the bed for 2 months. The boy only saw him because he was lying on the floor, so he had a clear view under the bed.
No!
When I was a teenager, I was home alone one weekend and I was sleeping in my parents' room since there was a TV in there. Sometime around 2 a.m., I felt like I was being stared at from the direction of the hallway. I looked up and I saw a shadow person looking at me. It was weird because it was a pure man-shaped black mass and I could see him in the dark hallway. I'm guessing the light from the TV helped. I sat up and stared back, but I was terrified. We looked at each other for probably 5 seconds and then it turned around and walked down the hall. A few seconds later, I heard a loud crash. I was so scared I turned the TV to the Disney Channel and stayed awake for as long as possible. When I woke up the next morning, I walked down the hall to the bathroom, and that's when I noticed a mirror that was hanging had fallen off the wall and was shattered. My family still doesn't believe me, but I know what happened.
Door open.
I went to the bathroom in the middle of the night after some nightmares, and left my door cracked open before I got back into bed. When I fell asleep, I dreamt that I was outside my room. In the dream, I saw my door cracked open. I pushed it open, and then saw myself sleeping. When I woke up, my door was wide open.
My friend told me about something that happened to her when she was younger, about 8 or 9. She was walking home from school and got her key out to let herself into the house. Her single mom worked and came home later on weekdays. As she reached up to put the key in the door, her mom opened it in a dressing gown, having left work sick. Instead of greeting her, she looked straight past my friend and immediately said, "Who are you?" My friend turned around, and a man in a long coat hurried back down the path and down the street. Being ill that day had possibly saved her daughter from something potentially horrible happening to her.
Creepy basement.
One day while doing my laundry, one of the lights blew out in my basement. My basement is set up so that the laundry room is split up from the other side of the basement with a wall and a door. In order to get upstairs, you have to exit the laundry room and go through the other part of the basement. So the light blew in the other part, not the laundry room. As it was the only light on that side, it was pretty dark. I finished the laundry I had to do while dreading the walk through the dark basement. I exit the laundry room, get halfway through the basement, and I hear a loud cackle. Imagine a sound people make when they imitate a witch. Take that and imagine the witch had been smoking for 50 years, making her voice deeper and hoarser. That's what I heard, clear as day, right behind me. I didn't hesitate to bolt for the stairs. I waited until my father got home and then changed the bulb. I have yet to hear that cackle since, and I have not told a single person in the house about it. This happened to my dad when he was a little kid. I think it messed him up a bit emotionally, but he never admitted it. The story freaks me out just imagining it. So I'm pretty sure my dad was 10 years old, and he was home alone for whatever reason. He was watching TV in the living room. It was the only TV in the house, and all of a sudden, the TV just shut off. So he got up and turned it back on. It was an old shitty TV, so it wasn't weird at all. When he got back on his couch, it happened again. He got up once again and turned the TV back on, and again it turned off. He repeated this process a couple more times before he started to look for the remote. While looking for the remote, he walked over to check behind one of the couches and saw a man hiding in the corner, holding the TV remote. My dad described the man as having long, messy hair and a crazed look in his eyes. He gave my dad a smile, and my dad ran out the front door screaming like a little girl. He went to his neighbors, who called the police. The man was still in the house when the police got there, so he was arrested. My dad told me that he still assumes the man was either homeless or crazy. Either way, this story is downright terrifying.
Och detta var en till reaktionvideo. Den heter 13 truskar och horrorstory.
Det var videosläpp. Du ska ni gilla prenumerera. Hejdå!
Och detta var dagens video. Reaktionvideo. Ni kan gärna prenumerera och gilla och dela och trycka på rinklaxis för nästa video. Bye, säger jag.